All right, Cowboys Nation, let's get into the latest on the defensive coordinator search, because this one has been moving fast, and there's still a few moving pieces that don't quite line up perfectly. We've got a third in-person interview happening today, and the reports on the timing and the process have been conflicting enough that it takes a little bit of mental gymnastics to try and connect the dots in a way that makes sense. But the big takeaway here is that the Cowboys are going to have a new defensive coordinator soon. And it's not going to be one of those long, drawn-out sagas that leaves us hanging for weeks. If I had to guess, I'd say we'll know who the next DC is within the next week, even if the official paperwork hasn't been finalized yet. Now, the part that has been stirring up the most confusion is the Jim Leonhard situation. He's still very much in the running, but the question has been whether or not he can even have an in-person interview yet. The traditional understanding of the NFL's rules has been pretty clear. You're not supposed to meet in person with a coach who is still actively coaching in the AFC or NFC championship game. The idea is that you let them focus on the game, and then you talk to them once that's over, usually on the following Monday. That was the common understanding up until very late last night, when a report surfaced suggesting that the timeline might actually be different than we thought. According to the Dallas Morning News, Calvin Watkins is saying the NFL indicated that teams can in fact talk to potential coordinators up until Saturday, but they just can't do it if the team is still in the thick of prepping for a championship game. So in other words, the window might be wider than we assumed, but there are still practical limitations. That's why this whole situation is interesting, because if that report is true, then it opens up the possibility that the Cowboys could have interviewed Leonhard this week and simply chose not to. Or that Leonhard himself decided it wasn't worth it. Because if you're Denver and you're in the middle of preparing for a championship game, the last thing you want is to be flying out to Dallas for an interview on your only off day. It's not just about logistics, it's about focus. And that's why I think the most logical explanation is that Leonhard chose to wait. He's got a huge game to prepare for, and if he's genuinely interested in the Cowboys job, it makes sense to hold off until after the game when he has a full week of prep time to give to the interview process. It's not that the Cowboys don't want to talk to him. It's just that this is the kind of decision that requires the proper amount of attention and respect. On the other side of this, the Cowboys have been very deliberate in their approach to this search, and that's something that should not be overlooked. This is a very different process than what we've seen in the past. The Cowboys are doing multiple rounds of interviews, and they're going through more candidates this year than they have in previous searches combined. They're not just rushing to pick someone. They're taking their time, doing their due diligence, and letting the process unfold. And that's why I'm not worried if they decide to wait on Leonhard or if they decide to move forward with one of the three candidates they've already had in-person interviews with. If they feel confident that one of those guys is the right choice, then they should pull the trigger and get it done. But if they feel like they need more time, or if Leonhard is someone they want to seriously consider, then waiting a week is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of smart management. And here's the key point. The Cowboys are actually ahead of the curve in this whole defensive coordinator search cycle. Most NFL teams haven't even started their search yet. Outside of the Jets and Commanders, who have been doing their initial interviews, the rest of the league is still largely in the early stages. So yes, it might feel weird to us as fans because we're used to the Cowboys moving fast or making a splashy hire, but the reality is they're in a strong position. They have the luxury of time, and they're using it to make sure they get the right person for the job. Even if it means a little bit of waiting, it's better than rushing into a hire that might not fit their system or culture. So what does all this mean for the actual candidates? Well, the Cowboys have had 3 in-person interviews so far, and one more happening today. The first of those was Jonathan Gannon, who met with the team earlier in the week. Gannon's background is familiar to a lot of Cowboys fans because he worked under Mike Zimmer in Minnesota and was the defensive coordinator in Indianapolis, where he had a pretty rough time. He then moved on to the Eagles, where he was their defensive coordinator for a couple of seasons before eventually taking the head coaching job in Arizona. That stint in Arizona is what makes a lot of people nervous because the results simply weren't there. They were never consistently good, and injuries played a big role in that. But the bigger question is whether Gannon is truly an upgrade over what the Cowboys had last year. And the answer is yes, he is. The bigger issue is whether he's the kind of upgrade that makes you excited. What makes Gannon appealing to some is that he's not just a carbon copy of what the Cowboys ran under Mike Zimmer or what they've done in the past. His defense is zone-heavy, but it's not the same zone scheme that people often associate with other coaches. He uses more disguise and more coverage variation than what we saw for the Cowboys last season. He doesn't blitz a ton, and when he does, it tends to be more creative and less predictable than what we've seen for some other coaches. He also likes to use different fronts, including five-man fronts and some unique three-safety looks. There are definitely some interesting concepts there. The issue, again, is that the results in Arizona weren't strong enough to inspire full confidence. Even when the system looked like it had potential, the defense didn't consistently deliver. That said, Gannon is still a candidate who could bring a significant improvement, especially compared to what we saw last season. The second in-person interview was with Dante Jones, who has been making a lot of noise in coaching circles. Jones is the Vikings' defensive passing game coordinator, and he has a reputation for being a strong communicator and a creative thinker. His background includes time in college coaching, and he's had stints in Miami and Cincinnati before landing in Minnesota. The reason he's intriguing is that he has been around some strong defensive minds, and he has a history of working in systems that can be very effective. The downside is that his one full season as a defensive coordinator at LSU was not successful. The defense struggled, and the results were not good. But a lot of that could be attributed to injuries and a lack of continuity. The bigger point is that Jones has shown he can operate at a high level in a defensive structure that is effective, and that's what makes him appealing to the Cowboys. And then we have Christian Parker, the Eagles' passing game coordinator, who is set to interview today. Parker has had a fast rise through the coaching ranks, and his age is one of the things that makes him so intriguing. At just 34 years old, he would be one of the youngest defensive coordinators the Cowboys have ever had. That alone is a departure from the norm, and it could be exactly what the Cowboys need to bring a fresh perspective to the defense. His background includes work in the Broncos secondary, time in Green Bay as a defensive quality control coach, and experience as a collegiate analyst at both Notre Dame and Texas A&M. The Eagles have had him on their radar for a reason, and the Cowboys' interest suggests they see something in him that could translate into a new identity for the defense. Now, what makes Parker particularly interesting is the coaching influences around him. He has ties to the Vic Fangio coaching tree, which is known for being detail-oriented and structurally sound. He also has influences from other respected defensive minds like Mike Elko, who brought him into the collegiate world, and others who have shaped his approach. If the Cowboys are looking for someone who can bring a modern, disciplined, and innovative approach to the defense, Parker could be the kind of hire that changes the culture. It's a gamble, sure, but it's the kind of gamble that could pay off big if he's given the right support and the right pieces to work with. So as we sit here waiting for the next move, the big question remains: who will be the next Cowboys defensive coordinator? Will it be one of the candidates who has already had their in-person interview? Or will the Cowboys wait on Jim Leonhard and potentially bring him in for a second round? The process is unfolding in real time, and the Cowboys seem to be doing things differently this year. They're not rushing. They're not panicking. They're being methodical. And for a franchise that has often been criticized for rushing decisions in the past, that's a refreshing change. Now, let's dig a little deeper into what the Cowboys might be looking for, because when you step back and look at the landscape of defensive coordinators around the league, the Cowboys are in a position where they can afford to be picky. They have a roster that has talent, they have a defensive unit that just needs better structure and better coaching, and they have a front office that is finally showing signs of wanting to get this right. The question is, what kind of identity do they want for this defense? Do they want someone who will come in and simplify things, someone who will build a system that fits the current personnel? Or do they want someone who's going to shake things up, bring new concepts, and force the team to evolve? One of the reasons the Jonathan Gannon candidacy is so interesting is that he represents a more traditional, structured approach. He has experience as a head coach, and he has experience in multiple defensive systems. His defenses tend to be zone-heavy, but with a lot of disguise and a lot of variation. If you're a fan of the idea that the Cowboys need to be less predictable and more disciplined, Gannon makes sense. He's also a coach who has worked with some strong defensive minds, and he's shown the ability to adjust and adapt when needed. The problem is that the results in Arizona weren't strong enough to make him a slam dunk. If the Cowboys hire him, they will be betting that the talent and the environment in Dallas can bring out the best version of his coaching style. Then you have Dante Jones, who is a very different kind of candidate. Jones has a reputation for being a strong communicator, which is something the Cowboys desperately need. If you remember last season, one of the biggest issues was that the defense seemed confused at times. The communication was off, the adjustments were slow, and the overall flow of the defense felt disjointed. Jones comes from a background where communication is emphasized, and he has worked under coaches who demand precision. He also has a reputation for being creative and for being willing to take risks. That could be exactly what the Cowboys need if they want to become more aggressive and more unpredictable. The downside is that his only full season as a defensive coordinator was not great, and there's always a risk that he is not ready for this kind of responsibility. But the upside is that he could bring a new energy and a new approach that could pay dividends. Christian Parker is the wild card here, and the one that might actually make the most sense in the long term. He's young, he's hungry, and he's been rising quickly through the coaching ranks. He's not the kind of coach who is going to be stuck in old habits. He's going to be someone who is willing to innovate and adjust. And because he's young, he might be more open to collaboration and to building a culture that is based on communication and accountability. The question with Parker is whether he's ready for the pressure of being a defensive coordinator in Dallas, where expectations are always high. The Cowboys are a franchise that doesn't tolerate mediocrity, and the fans are not patient. If Parker is hired, he will have to prove quickly that he can handle the responsibility and that he can deliver results. Now, let's talk about the bigger picture, because the Cowboys are not just hiring a defensive coordinator. They're trying to build a defensive identity that will last. They're trying to create a culture where the defense can consistently be a strength rather than a weakness. And that's where the process matters. The Cowboys are not just interviewing coaches. They are interviewing philosophies. They are looking for someone who can not only design a good defense, but also lead and develop players, communicate effectively, and build trust within the organization. That is the kind of coach that can transform a defense. And that is why this search is so important. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Dallas Cowboys. Feel free to share your thoughts on the news in the comments as well. The league woke up buzzing with what could become one of the most unexpected moves of the season. Whispers spreading out of locker rooms and front offices suggest that BUDDA Baker may have quietly reached an agreement with the Dallas Cowboys, a development that, if confirmed, would send shockwaves across the NFL. Nothing has been officially announced, but multiple sources close to the situation insist that conversations accelerated quickly and caught many insiders completely off guard. Baker has long been viewed as the heartbeat of Arizona's defense, a player known not only for his physical presence, but also for his leadership and football intelligence. The idea of him wearing a Cowboys uniform feels almost surreal, yet that is precisely why the rumor has gained so much traction. Dallas has been searching for a defensive spark, someone capable of commanding the secondary and elevating the unit's intensity, and Baker fits that profile perfectly. Speculation suggests that the Cowboys front office sees Baker as more than just another star addition. The belief is that his versatility could allow the defense to disguise coverages, attack the line of scrimmage more aggressively, and bring a level of swagger that resonates throughout the roster. For a franchise that thrives on headline moves, this potential signing feels very much in character. On the other side, questions naturally arise about Baker's motivation. Some around the league believe he may be looking for a fresh challenge, a new stage, and a roster built to contend immediately. Dallas offers all of that, along with the spotlight that comes with playing for one of the most scrutinized teams in sports. For now, everything remains in the realm of speculation. No contracts have been paraded, no press conferences scheduled. Yet the mere possibility has already shifted conversations across the league. If this rumor becomes reality, it may be remembered as one of those moments that reshaped expectations overnight, reminding everyone that in the NFL, even the most unlikely scenarios can suddenly feel very real. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Dallas Cowboys, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. We always look forward to your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.